Hi, everyone. Garth here. Welcome to the CPA Ethics and Intelligence Show. Just as a forewarning, the audio quality for some of the clips that we have of the main stage speakers live at Web Summit in Vancouver wasn't the greatest audio quality. We tried to pick it up a bit. We don't have too many of these clips. They're not too long, but I do summarize them at the end. But we wanted to let you know the audio quality isn't the greatest, so bear with us. But the points that were made, the themes, the vibe of the summit, definitely worth a listen. Thanks, everyone. I'm here in Web Summit in Vancouver for this year's huge tech conference, and I'm here as media to just get a view of the landscape that's here as AI and Gen AI is exploding. This is where the startups, the young, maybe not so young entrepreneurs come to look for venture capital and also to just get a vibe of what's happening. I'm only here for a couple of nights, so this is an emergency podcast about Web Summit because I'm off to somewhere else. But I did attend the opening session of the summit, and I thought that was really important to see because it's setting the tone. I was here last year, and the tone last year was, look how far things have gotten. Like now, with generative AI and what is happening with OpenAI, we're going to see the possibilities. Here, the opening comments and really the tone setting by the chair of Web Summit and going into what the future holds is about the reality, the geopolitical reality of AI, what nations are doing, what the practical use of these tools are because they are here. They are expanding inside corporations, businesses, individuals. And what does it mean as it's no longer just something we're thinking about and seeing in the background? It's really in the foreground. And there is this sheer energy and also concern about what this means more so than it was last year. And I think that was captured by a few of the keynote speakers to begin the conference. And I just wanted to talk about them, and we'll have sound bites from their opening remarks where it makes sense. And I wanted to start out with, I thought, the most interesting person that just opened up the conference, which was Sigrid Jin. Sigrid Jin is a Korean Canadian, and you may have heard of him if you were in the know even before he did his most famous thing. But a few months ago, there was a code leak for Claude's code got released, not really released, but leaked accidentally. And all of a sudden that was out there in the open because as soon as it was open and available, a whole bunch of individuals grabbed it and published it. And the code itself is proprietary. It's what makes Claude, I think, on the $1 trillion valuation scale. So it was a major leak from Claude and Anthropic. And the question is, what was going to happen with this open code out in the open, in the space where individuals like Sigrid Jin could do something with it? So what Sigrid did, and this is where the term Tokenmaxxing is coming from. If you know what that is, tokening and tokens are what are now needed to really get to maximize these generative AI tools because they're limiting how often you can use them because the volume of users are going up. This is also how they're creating paywalls. Max tokening is a way to look at how can I get the most out of my AI tools and specifically agents. And Sigrid Jin, this Korean Canadian just brainchild, is really, it was an amazing speaker, is the poster child for that because once Claude's code leaked, Sigrid said, okay, what can I do with this? And what he decided to do was see if he could recreate the code for Claude using agents and max tokening, using all of the available tokens that he has. Now, he has them across different platforms. That's ChatGPT and OpenAI, Anthropic. And I think he was around billions of tokens that he has and he's been using. I mean, billions. You can just think about how much money that would cost if you're just using Claude and know what a few tokens are. Now, he was using some of the capabilities with max tokening before they put paywalls around how many tokens you could use, but billions. And that was his philosophy. Get as many tokens, maximize the agents to learn, to grab data. And what he did when Claude had its code leaked was that he used his max tokening style, and I'm going to have to keep saying that, max tokening, that's something different, not related to the tech industry, even though it's tangentially related to the tech industry. He used that philosophy in his way of using agents to recreate Claude's code. And it became viral. He was able to recreate Claude's code using agents. And in fact, he told the story that you'll hear in the clip about where he did this, which was on a plane. using the Wi-Fi of Air Canada to have the agents operate in the background to do the work to recreate Claude's code. And it was super interesting to hear because part of this is his philosophy is you maximize AI agents. Corporations, individuals, max tokening is the way to go. Now that can create FOMO. One is just the cost of how much money you need to spend to have the maximum plans in Anthropic and OpenAI and DeepSeek, whatever. DeepSeek is a different beast altogether, but just having all of these available generative AI tools so that you can max token can create a sense of, oh my gosh, that's a lot of money, a lot of resources. But his philosophy is you want to pour as much into this so your agents are just getting the best version of themselves. And he has a very specific philosophy. And he thinks that should be a philosophy that everyone should have. And it has some detractors for sure. So we have some clips of him speaking about this. And I just think he's super, super interesting because he captures the space we are in today, not yesterday, today. Part of this is, one, this is the ethics show, right? What is the ethical system of how Sigrid works? Because you're hearing a lot about how we should use AI. I mean, does that make it the right way to use the tools that are available? Because these take a lot of electricity, a lot of energy, a lot of environmental resources. What are they doing in terms of replacement and job costs? We're going to get into the other part of this podcast, which is what government is saying. We're using government of Canada as an example because we have a minister of AI who spoke at the opening session, along with Joelle Pignot, who is CEO of Cohere, which is Canadian now, German-Canadian AI company, just huge and a really important Canadian success story. So Sigrid I think he captured the sense that this is the reality, this is the resource. Now, the other part of his remarks, which I think are really important, you'll hear him in the clip, is that he still believes in human in the loop. He still believes that you can let these AI agents operate, but they check in. You'll hear a clip of him talking about that.
I do not want to fully rely on the AI itself because AI is always prone to some errors. AI can make a mistake while the AI is really smart, by the way. So I think I should join on the AI discussions rather than be a spectators of someone outside the circle. So I just want to find a way to intervene on their loop, or at least I can just kind of cast my opinions to my agent. But at least I just want to make sure that I know the timing where I can jump in or where I can just hand off so that I can just make sure the agents can work autonomously.
The checking in is so important. The ability to check in and understand what the agent is doing, to have some pushback, hey, is this the right way you're going? Now, again, you can have a little bit of pushback to that. It's how much of that is just kind of really just pretending like you're doing something, really you're letting the AI agent cook. And that's going to be a question that a lot of people are going to ask, but his belief is still humans in the loop. He is involved. Here's another clip of how much he uses these AI agents. He uses them all the time in his own personal and professional responsibilities.
Try to spend your AI pricing as much as you pay for your own house rent. That's because you have such an investment there. You can just hire your own agents. You can hire your own secretary on behalf of you. Humans are getting much cheaper. Just hiring for a part-time job.
So you can see here that the philosophy, and I really got excited about this because he captures this. Now, not exactly excited for everything that this potentially means, but Sigrid represents max tokening. He represents the view for a lot of the programmers and engineers out there about how this should look. But he still believes in human in the loop, which is hopeful for us when we talk about professional accounting and finance space, for us to still be involved. But again, how much of that is really involvement wasn't so clear in his answers, and they didn't have time to what does it really mean for you to check in on these agents? So Sigrid was really the most captivating, engaging of the opening keynotes because it just, to me, brought us into where we are today. He represents a lot of what the programming community, AI companies around the world are seeing. Max tokening, data, resources. Now, at scale, cost, he talked a lot about, he got the benefits of having Claude's code leaked. There's still a place for Anthropic. Anthropic did not sue Sigrid, probably because there is still the need for data centers, the mass amount of pre-training that happens inside Anthropic, which cannot be replicated even if you have their code. So have the code, that's great, but you can't do anything with it other than recreate it. You can't build it out like Anthropic can do to have its valuation go up. So interesting space to start the conference. The next part of this was more of the sort of the structural bureaucratic side of things, and maybe not as exciting as Sigrid because I thought it was really amazing. I really liked his style too. It was really engaging, and you can see the passion Sigrid is bringing to the space, but also again provides a lot of the themes for AI going forward. Was the next panel that was brought on by who was next was Evan Solomon and Joel Pignot. So Evan Solomon is the Minister of AI for Canada. We have a Minister of Artificial Intelligence. And Joel, the CEO, Chief Artificial Intelligence Officer of Cohere, which is Canadian-based. She's from University of Waterloo, where I went to school. That's the only thing we share in common because that company has done really well, and Joel is essential to the company. Why did they bring them out together? Well, they were talking about sovereignty. And what does it mean to have sovereign AI? And that is a big conversation in 2026 and going forward because each country is looking at this and saying, what do we do to make sure that our citizens' data is protected, that our citizens have the best use of these capabilities, that they're not vulnerable to outside agents. And when I say agents, I mean outside countries and nefarious actors. And that's how Evan, and you can hear it in this clip, defined what sovereign AI is.
This is an amazing time to be in Canada for AI. And as the first minister of AI, it's because we understood that we are at this unique moment. And the moment that we're in is really a moment of dramatic political realignment that's happening at the same time as a technological revolution. And because this political realignment around the world that our prime ministers talked a lot about, and the advent of AI as a transformative general purpose tech, this has created an enormous opportunity, and one of those opportunities is sovereign AI. What does it mean? In some ways, it's the most challenging policy idea for any country around the world right now to define it. One definition, and there's political, technical, legal, operational definitions of it, but the political definition of sovereign AI is to make sure that you have the AI ecosystem and the infrastructure to protect your government and your citizens' most sensitive information, data, and workloads under Canadian law, not subject to the coercion of an outside force. Okay? This is really important. And every country is making sure that they have the infrastructure and the capabilities to protect sovereign data and, most important, Canadians or citizens' data and privacy under the laws of their own country. And that means to do that, you need to build up the entire stack from the ecosystem of talent and the researchers like Joel to the energy infrastructure. We announced moving forward with a massive AI factory from a company here called TELUS, 3 new data centers. 2 of them here in Vancouver, closed loop, heat reuse, really brilliantly high, sustainable data centers that are built the right way, we think. So you got to build that infrastructure right up to the large language models. Sovereignty does not mean solitude. We are not trying to put a digital vote around Canada. We are open for partnership. It means resilience and optionality, but not solitude. The best innovation, American, European, Asian countries, Brazilian companies, South American companies, we want partnerships. And that's why we've made sovereign technology alliances with Germany, with Europe, with India, with Australia, because we want partnership with like-minded shared value to build the scale we all need.
So as Evan was speaking, I mean, a lot of this is where do governments involve themselves? And Canada is an example, because we have a Minister of AI, because Canada sees several ways to see the AI world. One is protection and the citizens and the information and data that Canadians have, and what are we doing to protect that? Because we're going to be using different types of AI tools from different countries, and what does that mean for our personal information, our privacy? The other part is infrastructure. What about the intellectual talent? The Cohere Stories that is a Canadian company, can we have more of these types of successes in Canada? And this is, again, you can extrapolate this to any country. And Evan is here as a minister because part of this is a government responsibility, I guess, in his point of view, to fund the innovation side. That means capital into different places, resources for data centers. Again, Canada has, he talked about these advantages that Canada has in terms of AI, where there are important advantages. You can hear him speak about that.
We want academics to share information in a way, and we want citizens to trust that they are not going to have their information in privacy abuse. So there's a value in these partnerships. Part of the stack, the best way I think to frame it is build, partner, buy. Some things we're going to build here. And we're going to build because we have the competitive advantages and we can build them ourselves. And we want to press it. We have massive competitive advantages in clean energy availability. We have massive competitive advantages in researchers. We have 3 national AI institutes that are churning out talent. Well, some of the best university systems in the world here in BC and around, churning out talent. I mean, Waterloo graduates more engineers here than Stanford.
And then the disadvantages where we might have to partner or buy. So he talked about build, partner, buy, and the 3 ways in which a country can look at their AI development and his role in it.
So this is photonic chips and semiconductors. We have the only end-to-end photonic fabrication lab in North America and one of the best in the world. So we are going to double down on that. We just decided to open our Canadian Photonic Fabrication Center up for private investment. So we are going to crowd in capital on that aspect of semiconductors. But there are some parts that we will encourage, but we are going to have to either partner or when we buy, because we still have it, we're just going to make sure that what we buy is reliable and safe and is helpful for us.
And Joelle was there as an important piece in this because she's an example for a country where Joelle did not go to San Francisco to at least start Cohere and keep Cohere in the United States, because the United States is the biggest player in AI. She came back, she started her company in Canada, and it's a Canadian company. And the next phase of that is these coalitions, these strategic partnerships inside the private AI community, the corporate side. And that's happening with Cohere and Alfalfa merging together or talking about how they're going to work together, a German-based company. And that is really 2 companies getting together, but it's also a national idea of Germany and Canada sharing these responsibilities to build their AI systems where they have the same maybe belief systems, social ideas. And so countries are sort of saying, hey, these 2 partnerships will work both on a private side and a corporation side, but also on a national side to build up the national side of artificial intelligence, because it's the United States, it's France, China, it's Canada. You heard Evan speak about that.
Yeah, a huge reaction to the Sovereign Technology Alliance from other countries who are very keen. We have a G7 tech meeting at the end of this month in Paris, and there's an enormous amount of conversation about the Cohere Alfalfa deal, partly because it was a pioneering deal in sovereignty, that this is going to have a Canadian headquarters, Canadian IP, Canadian innovation, and a German headquarters. And it allows those countries and others who want a platform that allows them to build their sovereign stack with others. And we need scale. Like, this is a competitive business. That's the large language model. There's only 4 countries that really have the big large language models for this. Canada's one, obviously France, Europe, or France and China and the United States. So Canada's role is to build on some of its major competitive advantages. Our role as a government is to boost those. Cohere is one of them. And now, they've got the scale and the velocity to keep growing. But, here in this audience, there's lots of application models. So the layer on top of the large language model is kind of where the macroeconomic action is. Where we're going to see the big lift for our lives, and what AI does, not what AI is, what it does for us. The genius innovators here in healthcare and life sciences and agriculture, that's where you really see the big impact on the adoption.
And I thought that was really interesting. And Joelle brought in this view that's maybe the way the model is going to work.
But in terms of running them at steady state with tens of thousands of employees and all the costs for tokens, that is on the customer side that it happens. I think that's one major difference. The other major difference is, in some sense, I think we've been very smart about how we scale up models that we train. And we've trained models at large scales, hundreds of billions of parameters and so on. But in many cases, what the customers want isn't actually that huge model. What they want is a model that has a much better performance price trade-off. It's nice to run the best model for our models when you're running for just like a pilot, a few dozen employees. When you start scaling this up to 30,000 employees, 100,000 employees, giving them access, especially with agents, to huge amounts of token. What you actually want is a model that's much more efficient for a decent performance. And you also want the ability to track that usage and to make sure that you're getting ROI. And so we've been able to craft models that have a very sweet trade-off in terms of performance and efficiency, which makes it really attractive. And in terms of running them at steady state for tens of thousands of employees and all the costs for tokens, that is on the customer's side that it happens.
That was really a powerful message as well, because again, to set up this opening theme, and you've heard from Sigrid, you've heard from Evan, you've heard from Joelle throughout this podcast, is what is the national outlook for this? What is the private corporation outlook for this? What is the individual outlook? Joelle brought up a lot of uncertainty.
I think we also have to be mindful of just how fast things can change. Right, like you don't have to look too far back before LLMs rushed onto the scene, agents, and so on. And so there's still a lot of uncertainty in terms of what's going to be the value across the whole stack, where the actual value is going to be created versus which part is going to be commoditized. Even with respect to models, a little while ago, there was definitely a sense that you need to have the ability to train your own models. It turns out to be very expensive endeavor, and few are left. But nonetheless, you want to have optionality in terms of which models you're going to use. Now, a lot of the value is moving up the chain, whether it's in terms of developing platforms or even in terms of the service layer that we talk about, building large. People are worried about employment, but we're seeing the opposite effect of building large teams of forward deployed engineers, reskilling workers across different segments of the industry who have that ability to be AI native. And we're seeing value also sort of push down to the lower layer in terms of the chips, in terms of the GPUs, and so on and so forth. And these things can change very quickly. You get these kind of disturbing events, these events that disturb the status quo. A lot of it comes from the research community, but some of it also comes from the developer community and the community at large. What they want is a model that has a much better performance price trade-off. It's nice to run the best model for our models when you're running for just like a pilot, a few dozen employees. When you start scaling this up to 30,000 employees, 100,000 employees, giving them access, especially with agents, to huge amounts of token. What you actually want is a model that's much more efficient for a decent performance. And you also want the ability to track that usage and to make sure that you're getting ROI. And so we've been able to craft models that have a very sweet trade-off in terms of performance and efficiency.
So there's a lot of uncertainty still. So it's hard to say this is where the money should go, this is where the future will go. And I try not to do that on this podcast. And that's an important thing to say. This is agents today. This is the way we should build our stack. You heard a lot of these terms. There's stack, there's harnesses, there's these terms that are out there, and sometimes they can be a bit overwhelming. But a big part of that is, what are we doing to make sure our countries, individuals, and businesses are doing the thing here? One of the more interesting quotes was Evan Solomon talking about the pom-poms and the pitchforks. Here's that quote.
We should be open to all these opportunities and trickle down. We got to be candid about the concerns. Like, we can't be too far ahead. Innovation, I always say, technology moves at the speed of innovation, but citizens move at the speed of trust. So we've got to get the trust up. We have low levels of adoption of AI here in Canada, some of the lowest in the OECD. So part of that is trust related. But we should be open about the concerns about sustainability, water usage, heat usage, power usage, job training, security issues. These are very, very real and present issues that we should, like my joke is there's team pom-poms and team pitchforks. The pom-pom teams are like, yeah, it's going to change the world. A lot of pom-poms here. And then team pitchforks are like stock building. And, my job, and I think a good entrepreneur's job, is to be sort of a pragmatist. We know this is coming. We've got to get it right and build pragmatically.
And I see that a lot too. Hey, let's do this. AI, the cheerleaders, and then there's those that say, no, this is going too fast. This is going to destroy the world. And the pragmatist, as Evan said, is the pragmatist or the realist. that's where I stand too. I don't see that this is something that's a fad or just push it away. I mean, this is just moving at light speed, but to just move into the space without thinking about open or closed, ethical responsibilities for these corporations, different nations, privacy, information, how a corporation is bringing their employees along, humans in the loop, AI inventory. There's so many things to consider rather than just rushing in and kind of just saying, okay, let's just put out our AI agents and let them cook. And so this is the opening night, and I'm only here for 2 nights, and we'll see if I have another podcast. It just depends on how much content I have. But the first night to hear Sigrid Jin was amazing, and Evan Solomon and Joel Pignot. And part of that was to set the landscape for 2026. And again, things are just moving at light speed. If you ask me, I'm still feeling the shock of how fast things are moving. And when I hear max tokening, like, my gosh, that is something. Do I need to max token? Should I max token everything? One of the things you can hear Jen talk about is like, buy the plus of Claude, buy like just the plus, not the $20, the enterprise services so you can have the maximum amount of tokens. And it's just a massive push on these agents that you can have personally, professionally, to do its thing and to see what they're capable of and where they can help you. And again, that can create a lot of FOMO, a lot of fear of missing out. Max tokening, I think, it's a polarizing idea. And there's a lot of writers that have written about whether that's a good thing, bad thing. Because again, part of this is you need resources. Is the world really better off with this? Because you're going to need massive data centers. You heard maybe talk about them in Abu Dhabi and in Dubai. Part of this is there's just a massive resource need to have this AI development continue. And Sigrid in particular talked about the scaling, and there's a law of scaling here. The constriction of how fast AI can grow is really determined by the resources. That means the GPUs, chips, the data centers, the data itself, and breaking those down can happen, but at what cost? And there's questions about the environment and other questions about is that ethically the right thing to do if we go through that? Maybe do the things that will push AI into an accelerated curve, but again, at what cost? And sounds like we're moving to trying to push things, and there's a race. You can hear it from Evan, you can hear it from Joel, you can hear it from Sigrid. There's a race right now. The race is based on resources and capabilities, the individual talents. For us in the space where we're not in this world, like CPA and finance professionals, who this podcast is for, we can just kind of look and, like an F1 race, sit back and go, boy, these cars are driving really fast. I hope those drivers have control of the wheel as they go around the corner at whatever, 250, 300 kilometers per hour. I hope so, because we're getting the results of the work. Ultimately, a lot of us don't affect what's happening. There's the government regulation side, there's the corporation side, thousands of entrepreneurs that are here at Web Summit with different ideas. That's them in terms of development and growth. Users like, for example, myself as a content creator, but CPAs, auditors, tax professionals, consultants, every different ways in which CPAs kind of work. We're going to be using these tools or being asked to use these tools. I just saw more information about, I believe it was Grant Thornton to develop an AI audit methodology or tool, and you're going to see more and more of the firms saying, hey, we have something that's probably going to do more generative AI stuff and take away some of those tasks that are routine. So that's the space that we're in right now. And being here, you get a sense of it. If you're going to ask me how I feel, because I'm off to another conference where I'm speaking on AI, how I feel about it after the opening night and just getting a vibe and sense here in Vancouver for the energy. I'm excited, but I'm also at the same time like, where is this going? What is happening? My mind is exploding inside my skull. That is still happening, even as Evan and Joel in particular try to say, hey, we're going to putting structure and some ideas to make sure this doesn't just get out of hand. Evan in particular being part of the government of Canada. But then you get Sigrid Jin. And that Sigrid is on the ground doing stuff. And he's not bound by anything. He's just going for it. Part of that story was like, I'm going to do what it takes with the Claude code to see what I can do. And he did something crazy you wouldn't have thought possible. And again, Wi-Fi on the Air Canada flight to really help him complete the code. And then he'd done it. And questions about should he have done it? That's a lot of the reporter was asking. Should he have done that? Was there copyright? Was there ethical? And he didn't see it that way. But again, that's his point of view. The reason she asked these questions is, what is the proprietary use of this? And again, the other question is, Claude has probably used a ton of pre-training data that it didn't have proprietary rights to, and that's been a lot of the concern around these AI companies. Where are they getting their data? From literature, from authors, from content creators, and they're not really attributing it back. to those individuals or giving them money for it, royalties and artists and others that have given the large language models their data. But all of this seems to be a big loop where copyright is more of a theory. And sure, that has some merits, but also for those that have content, and those that bring out the best in humanity, literature, poetry, music, theater, film, what does it mean? That's all I can say. I don't have an answer for that. So hopefully you enjoyed this podcast. And again, hopefully you'll listen to Sigrid. But it was really important to hear this. And I think it's a really important podcast to listen to because not everyone gets a chance. I'm really happy that Web Summit has invited me back here as media because not everyone gets a chance to be at ground zero to see what is happening with the people who are developing and creating content. So it's a privilege to be here, and I want to use that information and the access to send out information that I think is important to our community. I speak specifically to the finance, accounting community on ethics and artificial intelligence, and this is, I think, a great way to do that. And then hopefully you'll find this podcast really interesting. But it's current as current can be. So if you're looking for something current to listen to and something that is like what is happening right now as the development community is doing stuff, this is the thing to do. Listen to this podcast and like us on Apple and Spotify. And I will try to increase the frequency of these CPA Intelligence and Ethics Show podcasts because I don't always put them out there as quickly as I can. I also don't want to overwhelm the space. I think part of this is when I have real good content, something relevant and current to provide, I'll post. Let me know your comments. Send me your emails. Hopefully you'll find this really interesting. I might do a second podcast. Just depends if I can get some interviews. And thanks for listening and watching.